Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today is an exciting episode. This is something a little different. We are going to retell my story. So I told it a number of years ago now, but so much has changed. So much has been added to the story. Now I've worked with hundreds of other women. I've been putting content out like this on this channel for so long. By the way, if you're here, please subscribe. And now that I've worked with like hundreds of women to get their menstrual cycles back and I've been putting this content out, I know even better what questions you guys have around stories. You know, I have the HA podcast and I interview people and put out stories all the time, and I answer DMs and comments on this channel a lot. So I feel like people are also going to want to know things like, oh, well, how long did it really take? How much weight did you gain? How did your body change? Were you able to exercise? Were you able to exercise again? What is your life like now? Is it worth it? You know, really in a nutshell. So we're going to dive in. Keeping in mind, I have an in-depth video on this. It's like 20 minutes long, something like that, really going through my story years ago up until I had a few recovery periods. But since then, you know, I've started this practice and I've had a baby and things like that. So let's add that in and see where we're at. First and foremost, I grew up in Australia and I currently live in Austin, Texas. So I grew up in Australia. I lived there for 25 years and that is where it all began. So I had a totally normal upbringing, regular like public high school. I was not very athletic. I just played like netball. And then when I was about 18, I discovered Olympic weightlifting and I got really, really into it. And I basically dedicated my life to being an Olympic weightlifting athlete. The problem, it's not the problem, but a problem was that I had really no athletic background and no business treating my body as it's adapted and it's used to doing this, you know, just like diving straight in. This is what I'm going to do now. Especially because I was also working full time and I had started to track my macros because, you know, I really wanted to look like an athlete as well. So I had really piled a whole bunch on, and I also had my very own business. So I was working like 7 days a week eventually. And I had lost my period, honestly, way before I ever had my own business, way before I was working 7 days a week. At the end of the day, as soon as I started calorie counting, even before macro counting, I think my menstrual cycle was on the downhill. And what we know now about amenorrhea, about menstrual cycles, is you don't just go from having a perfectly fine cycle to no cycle overnight, typically. It starts to slow down and make changes. And this is one of the valuable things about the fertility awareness method of tracking your cycle, is that you could get these early signs. But back then I didn't do that. Now I teach that to my clients. I use that as a tool, but back then I didn't have that information. So when my cycle started to decline, I don't really know, but I'm pretty sure it's basically as soon as I started exercising a lot and controlling my calories to be in a deficit so that I could lose weight. Now at this time, I was about 5'4" and I still am. And I weighed about 73 kilos, you know, at the very beginning of my exercise journey. And up until I had started introducing calorie counting, you know, I was probably roughly 71. I think that in pounds, that's about 155. I began that little process and I kind of have blacked out. I just kept going. I was so dedicated. You know, I was in my teens and my 20s, and I had no responsibilities other than like that. You know, just whatever my goal actually was at the time, Lord knows. I worked really hard. I did end up competing a lot. I was a New South Wales state champion 2 years in a row. I really pushed my body to a limit that it wasn't ready to be pushed to. And because of the choices I made, I was never as good as I could have been. Met my husband and I moved overseas. So my husband is American and I moved to San Luis Obispo, California. And that is where I learned about my issue. So I always knew my period was missing, and I always knew why. I knew that I was exercising too much, and I actually kind of wore it as a badge of honor. Look at me. I'm such an amazing athlete that I push my body to such limits that I don't even have a menstrual cycle. So I just kind of kept going as I was. And I did have one period during that time, because when you move to the States, you are not allowed to work immediately. I moved on a fiance visa, a K1 visa. So I wasn't allowed to actually work there because I didn't have a social security number and things like that. I had to wait. And so for about 5 months, I was nothing but an athlete, and I loved it because I was an athlete and I was writing a lot and creating content for other things, dieting related. And I was just really enjoying that kind of like slowed down lifestyle. Like I really only have this one thing on my plate, and everything else I do is because I feel like it. I got one period during that time, which is kind of cool, because I was pushing my body pretty hard. But because I had so much less stress on my plate, I was able to get like one menstrual cycle. And I think honestly, just like shortly after that, I was able to start working. So then boom, I was keeping up with almost the exact same amount of training, and I was working again. So I just lost my period again, and it was what it was for quite a while. So eventually I go to an OBGYN checkup. I was new to the States, so I was still like navigating that system, and I just hadn't been to an OBGYN yet. And I go to one, and it's a male OBGYN, and he doesn't appear very healthy to me. He is extremely morbidly overweight. And so it was hard for me to really connect what he was saying to me with any kind of seriousness. I really had this judgment going on that I know better than him. He just doesn't know what health is. He just doesn't realize that I'm an athlete. So I have this appointment, and he asks me about my menstrual cycles, and I'm like, I haven't had one in 7 years or something like that. He's like, well, we worry about that. We worry when women don't have their menstrual cycles. First I'd ever heard about it. Never heard of it. Like, obviously I knew about amenorrhea. I knew you lost your period from over exercising and under eating or whatever, but I had no idea that it was a problem, right? That it was not just happening in a vacuum. So I was like, interesting. Okay. He gave me what we know now to be Provera, the progesterone challenge, where you take progesterone pills for 10 days and see if you bleed or not. He sent the prescription in. I didn't do it because I'm so healthy that I don't need his prescription. Plus, we also know now that it wasn't going to fix anything. He thought it would help. It would never have helped anyway. I never would have passed that test. So in that day, I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. Basically, my ego, you're questioning my health. So I'm going to figure this out. And slowly but surely, back then there wasn't as much info online as there is now. There still isn't that much. I heard this concept that maybe I work out too much, and maybe I don't weigh enough. Now at this time, I had fluctuated a lot in weight because dieting was really hard work for me. I struggled with binge restrict, meaning I tracked my macros so diligently, and I underate I was having about 16 to 1700 calories a day, which was resulting in binges at any opportunity that I could. So probably the longest I could go sticking to my macros was 2 weeks max. And that was working as hard as I could before my intuition, my body's innate wisdom kicked in and was like, we binging. We binging. During this time, I had such an unhealthy relationship with food. And I thought that it was just my personality. I could not fathom what it would be like to be one of those people who is not always thinking about food, who is not checking the time, wondering how long till lunchtime, who would look at other people who could not finish the food on their plate, or who could just spontaneously eat something or go out for dinner and just order whatever they wanted on the menu. I didn't understand what's wrong with those people or what's wrong with me. And now we know that what was wrong was I was very hungry. Those things do not happen to me anymore. I do not care what time it is. I do not obsess about food. I do not check the menus beforehand. I do not stress about it. There were times where my husband would want to go out with his friends and we would go, and it would be getting late and I hadn't eaten because there was nothing on the menu that was healthy enough, that fit my macros enough. And I would get frustrated and upset. And I don't mean to generalize, but men, a lot of them will not see this necessarily as a problem because they love us. They love us. They want us to be happy. So they'll feel like, yeah, this is a real problem and I've done something wrong, but no, he should be able to go out with his friends. I should be able to come. If there's nothing, no healthy meal, whatever, just have the nachos. But that's not happening. And he was suffering as well. And we had not even been together that long yet, So that just really sucks. And I feel for husbands who are dealing with our no, we can't have a spontaneous meal. This is a problem because I haven't fit my macros, or we can't do this because I haven't got my workout in. If I don't get my workout in, I'm going to have a lot of anxiety about it and we're going to have a big fight. So that is not normal behavior. And I had that behavior. I did not know that it was not normal behavior. So in hearing about HA and learning that that behavior might not be so great, you may be normalizing your body weight, right? At this point, I didn't end up telling you the numbers. I had fluctuated a lot due to binge restrict from 60, I had gotten as low as 61 kilos, which I think is maybe 130 or 125, to as I was probably up at my highest, 68. And 68 is where my body would always try to sit, even if I was tracking my macros less diligently, right? So if you've ever been in the macro tracking space, you know that there's some people who can quote unquote keep their body composition while loosely tracking macros. But then there are those of us who, if you are not super precise and in control of everything, you will not make progress with your macros. So I was that person. So when I got down to 61, that was being able to go for 2 straight months of not deviating from my macros. But that was really earlier on in my macro tracking career, because as I got deeper and deeper into it and more hungry and more deprived, the binging desires picked up and picked up and picked up. And I could no longer maintain a diet of that level of restriction. So I couldn't tell you when or how long for I stayed between 68 and 61, but I can tell you that I spent more of my time on the higher end, and I only ever spent a max of 2 to 3 weeks at any one lower body weight, because my body was obsessed with trying to get me out of this situation. And I just kept fighting it and fighting it. So I struggled a lot because, and I want you to listen very carefully, because there is a 99% chance that you, the person listening, feels this way about yourself. That 61 kilos at 5'4" is a quote unquote healthy body weight. That this is a sufficient body weight. It does not make sense that my menstrual cycle is missing. I am not a low enough body weight. And 64 kilos and 65 kilos and 66 kilos, heck, 55 kilos. So I'm going to take a pause right here. I do strategy calls with women all the time to see if coaching is going to be fit for them. You can learn about that on our website. I do these almost every day. Through Tuesday through Friday, I'm having many calls, a minimum of 1 a day. Sometimes I have 4. One of the, I see it coming every time. This is almost every single time. She/you are only 5'5" or you're 5'7" and you weigh 55 kilos, or you weigh 60 kilos. Maybe you weigh 52 kilos and you're telling me that you are a sufficient body weight. Body weight's not the problem. It must be stress. It must be something else. Look, that is a low ass body weight. I'm sorry. That is a low body weight. You are lean. I'm just saying that is actually a low body weight. And if you don't have a menstrual cycle, right? So this is the key. If you're saying my body weight's fine, and it's actually 55 kilos or 61 kilos at an average height, and you do not have a menstrual cycle, you cannot continue to BS yourself on this. That's what I'm going to say on that. Okay, so I was BSing myself on that. It was very confusing time. What do you mean? I'm not even like, why can my body not just let me do this? Why can my body not just let me go days or hours without thinking about food? Why can't my body just let me be thin? Why can't it let me be skinny? And we know now that that's because you're in a massive energy deficit. So we have a lot of science now to help us understand what's actually happening in the brain when we're in this energy deficit. We know what's additionally like how it's connecting to the different areas of our body to gauge energy availability, right? So there's a part of our brain that is always checking in on our energy status. And it's always checking and it's always assessing if you have enough yes or no. And if you are any body weight, quite frankly, but in an energy deficit, you are susceptible, it's possible for you to get HA. The lower the body weight, the more likely the chances are for you to get HA. There is a hormone in your body called leptin that is produced thanks to body fat. And there is an individual variance in how much body fat one person may need to produce sufficient leptin. And leptin is your hunger and satiation hormone. So your level of body fat and your leptin production can kind of help us understand why some people experience extreme hunger whilst other people are experiencing satiation, and why that level of hunger changes at different stages of recovery. So like we know this now and we use this information in practice, but at the time it was just really confusing to me. But now I know that my leptin and ghrelin levels that help with my hunger and satiation were being impacted due to my lower body fat, even though I didn't feel particularly small and everyone around me was telling me I looked great and yada yada. Okay, so that's an important fact here too. No one ever told me I was too thin. And this is where this hang up comes from. But that's not actually true. One person did. So one time when I had my cafe and I had been losing weight, and it was the very first time I started tracking macros, so I was very responsive at that time. My body really lost a lot of weight. And one of my employees said to me, hey, don't lose any more weight. And I remember just thinking, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as losing too much weight, right? Because we've been told that there is way too much food availability. There's way too much food availability in the Western society. Everything is way too calorie dense. Everything is way too palatable. The less you can eat, the better off you're going to be. The more weight you can lose, the better off you're going to be. The healthier you're going to be. The lower your heart rate, the healthier you are. These things are fundamentally untrue. Let's move to diet culture for a moment. One of the things that I discover more and more after having all these conversations with these women, these discovery calls, having our clients, is the completely backwards belief system about how bodies are supposed to be. So one of the reasons people have a hard time hiring us or joining the HA Society, or even just like deciding to embark on this journey, right? And like take the steps and do the work, eat the food, get the period back, is because they do not understand, like it's completely counterintuitive. You've been told your whole life that you are too big, smaller is better, smaller is worthy, smaller is attached to higher social status. Hilary Duff, the Pussycat Dolls, Kim Kardashian, Christina Aguilera, Britney Spears, like thinking back, right, to like the 2000s and stuff, where you were really, where it was really, really solidified that your body will never be enough if you don't look like this. It's very confusing. The mannequins in the stores, the women in the magazines, the girls on TV. And the thing is, if you do a deep dive on it, like list like 3 people who growing up affected how, like what you believe today to be the correct body to have. And go and research their story, so long as it's been like over 10 years that they've been in the spotlight, and you will find disordered eating. If you do a deep dive into everywhere that growing up you started to develop a story about what the ideal woman's body looks like, you will find a strong lack of health, both physically and mentally. And this is a big, big problem. And this is what is holding women back from recovery. They do not believe that it makes sense that we should have to be like a normal body weight. That we should, like, that a normal body weight is not super lean. You know, that we live in a world where women are just trying to get lean just to see if they can do it. We live in a world where girls are being exposed to the bodies of women who are under extreme pressure to do so, to have their body look that way, and are making a conscious decision oftentimes to put their health at jeopardy because they're in the limelight. And that is not where we should be getting this information from. And that is a big issue with why we struggle to get women to actually take the action and make the forward steps going against that. Because if they go against that, they might not be special anymore. You know, if you choose to recover, if you let yourself gain 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 30 pounds, you will no longer be special. Which is rubbish. Absolute rubbish. So this is where this is where everything takes off for me in my story. So I start researching and I come across the work of some really cool people. The main ones that come to mind back then for me were Noelle Tarr and Stephanie Rupa of Well Fed Women, as well as maybe Victoria Myers. Those are like the two that come to mind. Who since I've had Victoria on the show and I've been on her show because it's been around for quite a while, as well as Laura Schoenfeld. She talked a lot about amenorrhea, and those people really kind of asked the question, why do you think your body's so healthy? If you're so sure that your current height and weight is not the problem or like a contributing factor, you're so sure it has to be something else. I have to have a nutrient deficiency in something else. It must be because I'm not drinking bone broth in the morning. Why? Where did you get that from? And the very first time I ever heard like, hey, maybe you're too lean at my extraordinarily normal body weight, I was like, literally no, like you do not understand. I remember like walking on a walk, because I'm at the time I'm doing like freaking multiple mile walks a day. And I'm walking after I've done like CrossFit or something that morning. I'm going to train weightlifting in the afternoon. And I'm like, that's stupid. I'm so healthy. It's nonsensical. It's actually nonsensical. But anyways, interestingly enough, I continued to listen. And that's what really stands out to me is like, I heard those stories and I was like, no, but I kept listening, and I think a lot of you will resonate with that too, where you're like, I love listening to these stories because they're maybe, because I resonate. My gut intuition says this is worth listening to, but I'm gonna need to keep listening for a while before I have the courage and the bravery. We think the more content we consume on it, one day, just maybe I'm going to have the goals to do it. And that's true. I do think there's a level of like camaraderie and community and hearing it multiple times and really getting that reassurance that this is the path that is going to be the most impactful thing for a lot of people. So that kind of leads me to when I decided to make a change. And my decision to make a change was extremely slow. So I don't want anyone to feel like, because they didn't just go, screw it, I'm doing it, I'm diving in right away at the get-go, that they're failing in any way. We find that it's very normal for someone to need the evidence that this is true for them. And because of everything we just discussed, it's really hard for them to just believe, right? Or to even believe that it's worth it, especially if you're not suffering with symptoms yet. You just have a missing period. So, what we do nowadays is we kind of gather a whole lot of data and metrics on someone who's a client and show them evidence. This isn't working. Like, check this out. Look, you can't argue with these metrics. You have amenorrhea and it's because of what you're doing. But that's hard to do on your own, right? So I needed a little help like that. I had started making some slight shifts. I was really hoping that I could mitigate weight gain, so I would eat a little bit more, but I would still exercise just as much, or I stopped exercising. I stopped doing CrossFit type workouts, and I replaced it with 5-mile walks a day. It was really negating a lot of it, but that was my process, that was my path, and that's kind of what I needed to gather that information and see, look, you have been doing a lot more work on your body. You have been pushing your body a lot more than you were giving it credit for, because you have been told that it is impossible to overexercise in this climate, in this culture. That we're so unhealthy as a culture, that we're so sedentary as a culture. Cavemen used to be so much more active, and now we just sit all day. So now you have to actively track your steps to make sure, no, that is what is making people sick, So I really had to gather evidence against that, because that narrative was so strong and had been ingrained for so many years in my head. So it's natural, it's going to take time. But I saw it not working. And in the end, I hired help, because truly you just often can't do it on your own. You can, but you want that person to tell you here's why this is what's happening, and here are the specific changes you need to make. Accountability as well, right? So I did that. I hired a nutritional therapy practitioner, and she, kind of helped me see it as it was and really give me that permission to recover. So it was hard, because I think a lot of the stories that we have around embarking on recovery is people are going to judge me. People are going to see me gaining weight, and they're going to think, oh my gosh, she's not fit anymore. She's not that fit girl anymore. She's let herself go, right? People are going to worry about her. And really comes down to, people are going to think you're less special. You're more normal or lame. You're not as valuable, right? And that's what stops people from doing it. So I want to just really reassure you that that's normal to experience those thoughts and those feelings and that fear. Because of that fear, I was really public. I came out and I was like, yo, this is what is happening with me. This is what's happening with me. I don't have my period. I exercise too much. I underate way too long. So just so you guys know, I'm going to gaining weight on purpose. Hey, that's what I needed to do, because I really looked at what is my biggest fear? My biggest fear is that others will judge me. Well, I can get ahead of that and be public about it, which kind of leads me to here, right? I have my own practice now because it was public and I shared about it, and people were grateful because it helped them. It helped them see that there was a problem with their lack of menstrual cycle. So I'm glad that I did that. I'm very glad I did that. A lot of people try to recover in silence. I think that's worse. I do not think that works for most people. I think you need to share it with someone. I think at a minimum, you need to have a recovery coach to help talk you through it. But really, the people you're worried about are the people in your real life. So you do need to share with some people what you're doing and what you're working on. So in the end, I hired that person. I got that help. And I was really inspired by my process, right? I really inspired myself because I went through it. I thought that the recommendations that were given to me were really interesting because they were extremely basic and extremely holistic. And they were just things I was afraid to do. And I nerded out and I dove in and I learned more about it. And I started a podcast called the Hypothalamic Amenorrhea podcast. And it just took off. It just took off. And then I started a community called the HA Society. And then I started coaching because I went back to school and I learned more about it. Just to really apply all I'd been learning. And I became really, truly passionate, not about menstrual cycles per se, but about what stopping this nonsense brings you. The longer you say, what, I just don't think it's worth it. I really just think I should find a different way because gaining this weight isn't worth it. The longer you do that, the lamer your life. Your life is lame. I'm sorry. Like, I'm so sorry. If you feel like your life is better, thinner, no, trust me. Your life is better when you're menstruating. Your life is better when you have way less restriction around food. Your life is better when you are not like losing your mind about all these small little things. You know, amenorrhea means you have extremely low estrogen, which is linked to, well, the female brain is estrogen dominant. Your bone health is completely linked to it. So osteoporosis and osteopenia are in your future if you progress with this. It's extremely linked to anxiety and depression. You know, when women fill out our intake form, they check every single box for anxiety and depression. And I know it's not just, I know it's not separate. I know it's related. And those things start to resolve and people start to get their true personality back. This version of you that's obsessed with dieting and obsessed with letting go of her size and would rather sacrifice her health or not be able to have a baby and just be infertile in the name of pleasing others and making other people think that you are special because you're in a smaller body, that is not you. That is not you. You are somewhere else in there. You do way more interesting things. You're cooler than that. You care about more interesting things than this. And the amenorrhea is a negative feedback loop and it's keeping you stuck in it. And as you make those first most difficult steps, because the first steps are the hardest steps, well, actually the first steps are kind of seemingly easy because you just do the first things that you're most comfortable with. It's really when you get to that ceiling where the things you're most comfortable with haven't made the difference and you realize, okay, I might have to push harder. I may actually have to stop eating more diet food and start eating more real foods, for example. Or I may have to let go of my 15K steps. That's where you're like, that's where it gets hard. And those are the first true steps that are really difficult. And then once you get past that, you get momentum and the ball starts rolling because you begin to have hormonal activity develop like immediately, right? But it will not happen if you are BSing yourself on the process. If you're telling yourself, because I did this, if you're telling yourself you are doing it because you switched into high intensity exercise for 5-mile walks, like it's not going to work. If you're just eating more low fat food or more rice cakes or whatever, it's not going to work. You know, these things, I've seen it all. I've seen everyone try it. You know, I've appeased clients and been like, we're going to do it your way and we're going to watch if it works or not. And then it hasn't worked. And then we've done it the right way. And that's what works, right? So seen it, right? This is not just me telling you my story. I'm also sharing what I see come up the most for others. And I'm kind of leaving out the things that are only relevant to like me. These are the really important things that you need to know. So in the end, did that after I got past that ceiling and like made those proper steps. After several years, it took me 6 weeks. And I talk a lot about in other videos why sometimes it's faster for others and slower for others. I believe that the work I had been putting in on my own was making a difference. And then I really needed that extra push to get across the line. But also 6 weeks is pretty much on point with how long it takes for a follicle to come to maturation. So that makes sense, right? It's going to take longer for you the more limbo you keep yourself in. And that was great. And then I was recovered and then I was inspired. And like I said, I started this business and this practice and here we are. So what I want to do is share some questions that like I promised I would at the beginning. Okay, so let's recap with common questions. How long did recovery take? So I had HA for several years and the whole process probably took me an entire year. But when I finally got past like my fears and my obsessive researching to like look for the one person who will tell me that actually no, all you need to do is like take magnesium. I don't know. That took me 6 weeks. But I do think it was like that whole year process. Like I couldn't have done it any other way. So I say it took me a year, but when I actually implemented changes, it took 6 weeks. How much weight did I gain? So went into recovery at about 68 kilos probably. And then I gained up to about 78. I have not been 78 since. that really was what people call overshoot, right? It's like I was eating in excess of calories and not like very intentionally. My body needed to gain weight and I was okay with that. And I had actually come to terms with, this is probably my body and this is probably how I will look. And that is okay with me. But to go from 61 kilos to 78 is legit, right? That's scary to people. And I was not comfortable. I was not comfortable. The reality was I basically went to a little bit more than what I weighed, before I ever started dieting. That was that. And then how did my body change then versus now? So I did not actively try to lose weight. Eventually, after about a year, my body stopped holding on to that much weight. Very interesting. I didn't think that would happen to me. I kind of thought some people like the weight just falls off, but that's probably not going to happen to me. Just, genetically, what I see in my family, how hard it's been in the past for me to lose weight. I just kind of felt like it would probably stay, but it has come down and I tend to range anywhere between 68 kilos and 72. So a lot of weight fell off me. But what I think is really interesting is that I actually went back to the gym properly after about a year. I had just been doing some basic workouts in my house, keeping it super light, super easy because I was in this recovery process for the long haul. I did not want to screw it up. I mean, full disclosure, I did screw it up a few times because it's also a regular part of the process to try to get your first period back or your second period back and then freak out because you don't have amenorrhea anymore. So you can't justify all this food. So you just thought, that's normal, but that's not what to do. It's common, but you shouldn't be doing that. So that kind of taught me, okay, I'm going to have to sit in this if I want my menstrual cycle back. And I'm going to have to let my body do the reps and have the positive feedback menstrual cycle after menstrual cycle after menstrual cycle before I just go and assume it's strong enough now to handle all of the crap that I used to throw at it. When I was ready to introduce exercise, I did it smart. I was no longer going to work out 6-7 days a week. I was going to lean on what we know about the science and take it super slow, meaning 2 to 3 days a week of training is probably all I need. I'm now well and truly untrained after a year, so I'm probably going to make a lot of progress without having to put in all of these hours, and I can assess later as I watch my cycle and see what changes. And I did notice interesting things, right? Like I started training, I didn't necessarily increase my food as much, and so I had shorter luteal phases and I had to play with that. I had to increase my food. I made sure I had a rest day every second day. I still to this day live by that rule, and that especially when it comes to resistance training and endurance training, I don't need to go past 3 days a week. There is no noticeable benefit at all in training past 3 days a week. So any more than that, and I'm not really doing it to get stronger at that point, it's developing into a story about weight loss probably. And it's going to be less effective for weight loss. So the reason this is interesting is because A, it answers the question about, can I exercise again, which was on this list, but it also was how my body composition actually changed. So back when I was obsessively training, I wouldn't lose weight very easily. Like I said, I had to be super diligent with my macros. And in this way, allowing my body to be trained and then rest, recover, and adapt and actually get stronger and gain muscle, my body composition changed. So at this body weight, I don't weigh myself regularly. So somewhere between 68 and 72 at any given time. I have a totally different body composition to when I first started. And I also just think in general, I'm not as so orthorexic and I'm not seeing myself. I'm seeing myself as I truly look, which is totally freaking fine. Can I lose weight? So like I said, I didn't try. It just kind of fell off me. And to be really frank with you, with a healthy hormonal profile, I have significantly less anxiety and I feel way less stressed about my weight on my body and how I look. And this huge thing happened where I got a stylist, which we've introduced into our coaching packages because it like literally just like learning how to dress your normal sized body is actually going to help with 70% of the problem. I promise you, You know, you think whatever, but it's true. Like I just know how to dress. So I look good. I look good in this body. I have a normal sized body that people on the street are like, she exudes the confidence of someone that I thought, like, if I want to feel that way, I need to look this specific way. Like, no, you can exude that confidence at any size. You just need to learn how to dress. So could you lose the weight? Yes. Will you want to? Maybe not. Maybe you'll be fine if you do the work to be fine with it. If you decide that you cannot be okay with this, because I hear that all the time, I cannot be happy in this body, whatever, like, talk to me about it when you actually are in that body. But yes, you probably need to give your body about a year, right, to get that positive feedback loop, get your body's allostatic load and homeostasis really at point where it's less sensitive to the changes. And so long as you're tracking your menstrual cycle and aware of how your exercise and diet is impacting your cycle, you will be fine. But you do need to know how to do that and how to adjust, right? You need to know how to track your cycle, and you need to know what it means, and then how to troubleshoot. So like, we teach that to our clients, and we teach that in the HA Society. So I recommend that if you are interested in that. But if you kind of just like take an approach to recovery where you're not learning any skills for the long term, it's going to be harder for you, because you're only going to lean on how you are used to working out and how you're used to dieting. So you're going to have to learn a better way. You're going to have to learn about the science of exercise, which I have talked about in other videos, and like what's actually effective for your goals. And you're really going to have to learn to take this slower approach. What is life like now? Okay, so after all of that story and I recovered, I got my cycle back, and I got pregnant after 3 tries. I have another video on that. I did have a short luteal phase issue. You know, that's just how it is. I made specific changes to improve that, and here I am. So I have a 20-month-old, whatever that means, like 1.5 years old or something, and she's great. And we're all healthy and we're all happy, and I have this business, and it's just like, so far so good. I have never dieted again. I have never ever since that day have I dieted again. And I have had so much fun. And then the last question, my favorite. All right, Danny. Oh, this is really great. I'm like so happy for you that this was your story. Is there any other way? Because I could not be happy in a bigger way, like in a different, I cannot be happy gaining weight. And I do not want to do it this way. And exercise is just like my stress relief, and there's nothing I can do about it. And I cannot avoid walking 1,500 steps because like my dog needs me, 15,000 steps, sorry. Because my dog needs me to walk her, and I have a really active job, and I just like love to work out, and it's my social thing, and that's my community. And is there another way? If those are you are not going to out supplement this. You are not going to reverse diet your way out of this. You're not going to gain enough muscle to have sufficient body weight. You need body fat to make hormones. Your brain needs estrogen for everything, quite frankly, but then for you to be able to ovulate, you need sufficient estrogen for all of the other reproductive hormones to happen. You cannot hack this. I do not care what you've heard or what you say. Now, you may not have to gain copious amounts of weight. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you are going to need to reestablish your relationship with food and exercise. You're going to need to be less strict and rigid. You're going to need to stop dieting, right? Meaning you're going to need to stop just increasing your calories with diet food. You're going to need to eat proper animal proteins, actual whole fats. You're going to need to stop restricting yourself of a cookie every now and then. You're going to need to back off of that lifestyle and back into a more feminine way of being. This is just how it is. And it is okay if you have to take your time to get there, but you do need to try and get there. And it is better on the other side. It's sick on the other side. So I hope you enjoyed this. If this is your first time to this channel, please make sure you go watch previous videos where I kind of go more in depth onto all of the different areas of recovery, both from a science perspective and a mindset and coaching perspective. I really hope you liked this This was like a feature film length. And if you have any other questions or anything comes up to this, or this story resonated with you, or you feel similar to this story, I want to hear about it. I want to talk about it. So please comment below or find me on Instagram at Danny Sheriff or at the HA Society. And I will speak to you guys next week. And again, make sure you like and subscribe to this channel. We release videos every single week. Okay, bye.